Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'd also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. On today's episode, Katie Rose guest Pryal joins us to discuss creativity and mental health and how AI is impacting creative writing. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Katie, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
I'd love to start off by learning about your story. So where would you kind of say your story in the autistic community begins?
I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was fresh out of college. It's kind of when it blossoms, right? And the early intervention and the basically good healthcare meant that I was able to live a, successful, fulfilling life, with bipolar disorder, which was good because a lot of people don't have that privilege. But it did open my eyes to the world of as I progressed through graduate school, because I have a creative writing degree, and then I have a law degree, and then I have a PhD in rhetoric, which is the analysis of social, public and political discourse and how it influences policy, like law. So it lended itself to with my law degree. And so I ended up in the academy. And so the point is that throughout all of this, I never, stopped noticing what it was like to be neurodivergent, to have what's called a major mental illness, an MMI, right? That's the term, the medical term, and one that is really highly stigmatized throughout my my academic career as I started. So when I started writing and publishing more research and presenting at academic conferences during the academic phase of my career, it was just so frequently, almost always wrote about mental illness, what I would now today hold under neurodiversity. But we're talking about, this is like 2000, like mid 2000s is when I started doing this work. And so neurodiversity as a bigger term and as a movement wasn't something I was very familiar with, despite being deeply immersed in the disability studies community. So I would go to disability studies conferences. I was a part of the disability studies caucus for law professors and for rhetoric professors, things like that. Okay. And so one day, a graduate student who has gone on to write one of the best books on autism that I think everyone should read. So this is Remy Yorgo. And so at the time, she wrote Authoring Autism. It's with Dude Press. Go buy the book. It's great. But anyway, she was a graduate student at the time, and I was a new professor, youngish. But her energy was fantastic. And she's autistic. And we would go to the same panels and things like that, a lot of crisscross in our work. And she was at this conference and she was handing out these buttons, and they said neuroqueer. It was wonderful, firm. And it had that infinity symbol rainbow that I had never seen before. I was like, heck yeah, give me that. And also a sticker for my laptop, and just stuck it around my laptop. This is such a great framework. So this was my first introduction, long before I was ever diagnosed with autism. I engaged in neurodiversity work and movement and community as a person with bipolar disorder. And then when I was diagnosed with autism in 2020, which is not that long ago, I'd already been, because of family members who are autistic and have been diagnosed before me, it actually sort of became this thing where it was like, should I even bother getting a formal diagnosis? But it's helpful if you can. There's reasons, right? We could talk about the diagnostic process and why and whatever. But it just sort of seemed like, oh, that's not surprising in the slightest, because I already started looking back, on my childhood and life, and going to public schools and all these things that were not able to care for a child like me, essentially. And so, like many late diagnosed adults, my past made a lot more sense, and my present makes a lot more sense. I felt a lot better about myself. What I considered total failures, it's not personal failures aren't anymore. It's like great. So I guess I would say that the biggest side points were, being diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 21 and really diving into my research in the mid aughts, and this meeting with Remy at a conference. They gave me the button. They gave me, the thing we talk about, this idea. So that's when neurodiversity sort of hit my life. And then, of course, my diagnosis in 2020. So this is across 20 years.
Creativity is something that I think about a lot. In thinking about that, just last month, you released a revised and expanded edition of your book, The Freelance Academic: Reclaim Your Career, Creativity, and Mental Health. So, when you think about mental health, how much do you see the impact of creativity on this aspect of your health?
So I wrote this book because I flunked out of being a professor, is how one way to put it. The academy is not the place of great acceptance, and where people can go and be weird. A lot of people outside of the academy think it is. It's very not that, actually. And so I got promoted. I didn't get fired. Actually, it was the opposite. I was promoted, but it was such a horrible environment, and not just this one institution. It's the whole. I'm saying it's a structural problem. So, and one of the things that was stifled was my creativity. And so, and this is a common theme among people I interviewed who are in this book and things like that, is that they go into higher education thinking they'll be able to do this work with their teaching, with their research and their writing or whatever. And in fact, that's not the case at all. That there's all these limitations put on you and have very little agency. And like I said, I think that outside of higher ed, we have this, and we all did in grad school, right? In fact, grad school, I had way more creativity in grad school. I got to my first jobs. I had multiple jobs before I finally gave up trying to find one that would, and then I get to these jobs, and it was all I could do just to keep up with the paperwork. It felt like Office Space. I was like, how is this what higher ed is? What happened? And what happened is a lot of things over the last, 40, 50 years. It depends on how you want to frame that story. Creativity, I think we'd probably say it's rarely a place that stimulates creativity anymore. And that's a shame. Okay. Because there's so many wonderful ways that it could. So one of the things that went away for me was I stopped writing my things that I love to write. And so I didn't have time. I was too exhausted. I was not rewarded. It was in fact frowned upon in some places. So to me, if you are a person, and I don't know if there is a person who isn't this way, but I'm not equipped to make this. You know what? Get it. I'm going to make the claim. We want to be creative as humans. We want to have agency over our lives. We want to express whatever creativity means to us, whatever it means to create. We have that inside us. We all have that potential, and it feels good to do it. But if you're in a workplace or a home in life or whatever kind of environment where those options aren't open to you because of punishment or whatever, then that's going to make you miserable. And so that's what that book's about. And I think that I'm actually willing to say that about every person and every job and every place, that if we can't express who we are, then in whatever way that works for us, whether it's coding a computer game or designing a bridge because you're an engineer, right? It doesn't matter. That creativity, if you're just a cog in a machine, like in a Pink Floyd song, then it's going to feel bad.
I've talked with several people here on Autism Stories who have discussed the challenges of higher education. Earlier this year, you released a new book, A Light in the Tower, A New Reckoning with Mental Health in Higher Education. So I think our support network and our environment are critical factors in educational success. And I'm wondering, in what ways do you think classmates and colleagues can do a better job supporting us as autistic people in higher education?
So we don't have 3 years for us to have this conversation. Let me ask you, just today, me and two of my kids were joking about executive function challenges, right?
Sure.
Forgetting stuff and putting in place, say, working memory workarounds. That's what, I call them that, but I'm not the only one. I mean, so we have workarounds that help us, those of us who struggle, which is a very common thing among autistic people or people with ADHD, or as I have pointed out in my book, anybody who falls under this bigger umbrella of neurodivergence. Because if you have deep depression, if you struggle with depression, your EF is trash, right? You can barely take a shower. All these things seem way too hard. Planning, your cognitive function goes down. Depression, anxiety does that to you as well. So as we think about this election, for example, and our students at school, our colleagues, okay, and if they are feeling, completely devastated because of this and a little freaked out maybe, or a lot of freaked out because of what this might mean, especially given what went down last time, that anxiety makes it literally more difficult to remember words that were spoken to you. So when it introduces themselves to you, you forget their name immediately. Those sorts of things that I sort of take for granted as my executive function challenges, working memory, processing speed, whatever falls under working, executive functioning. So it's important to remember that we're talking about, it's so much broader than just autistic people and or ADHD people. But that happened to be the group that was in the car with me today. And so we were talking about this because one of my kids kept forgetting keys and Kindle and this and that. And because they're going through a hard time right now in particular, right? And so as this hard time goes up, the ability to remember things goes down. So we're talking about workarounds. And so, but the thing is that a lot of these workarounds, which are like mission critical to my life or my kids' lives or maybe your life, can help all students too. Okay. And because your EF goes down when you're overwhelmed. So I think that there is a greater reason that we need to bring into education, higher education and high school. I mean, I'm not just talking about, I think this anytime new trainees on a job, but in higher education, we expect, students to just basically get drinking from a fire hose and to just take off from there and think everything's fine. It's really never fine to make someone drink from a fire hose. That's a terrible way to teach. And then, of course, the pushback I get when I say things like this is, well, you expect me to spoon feed these students. What about the real world and all this and this? Okay, so it's either a fire hose or spoon feeding. Surely there is somewhere in between where we can present material and encourage learning among students, and then students who have EF challenges, planning work, meeting deadlines, attendance, all these things that we take for granted. When I talk about this with higher education groups, I build up to it. I now spend like 30 minutes warming them up to this idea. And these are places where I'm brought in by the head of the entire university. They don't expect this to come out of my mouth. But I'm talking to the room full of 100 professors and I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. After all this, what is stigma? What is neurodiversity? What are our students facing? What is EF? What? Okay. So then I say, there's a slide that goes up. I rarely use slides with lots of words. It says this: I want you to stop grading attendance, class participation, deadlines, missed deadlines, and everybody's like, gasp. So attendance, isn't that how can we stop grading attendance or class participation, which I think is, hilarious. And then of course, then they don't even know what's coming last is, I just don't think we should give grades, and grading is stupid, actually. So I think everything should be pass fail. It's that simple. And if someone's failing, then that's actually your failure as a teacher. So let's figure that out. How it helps students? I mean, it's complicated, like I said, but autistic students struggle to find community. They can struggle to find community. I'm going to speak in generalizations here for a little bit. And I'm going to fold ADHD in with this as well, like autistic and ADHD, meaning autistic and ADHD. They struggle with executive function. They struggle prioritizing, which is part of executive function. And so you get to college and you got to prioritize, making new friends. Someone wants to be friends with me. That's a really big deal to someone who's autistic. Making a new friend for me is like, I'm marking on my calendar the day I made friends with so and so. I send them an anniversary card. I only have like 5 friends. Going to college, not easy to make new friends. We're not, and so the day I made a new friend, the day, so like I said, making new friends. Should I prioritize going out? What if that means I don't have enough time for my homework? This is overwhelming stuff. But I do not think it takes a lot of changes to our pedagogy to make higher ed more humane for neurodivergent people. In general, I just don't think it takes a lot of changes. Even though it sounds like when I say things like, let's just move to pass fail, that's a huge change. That's never going to happen anytime soon. But there's a lot of really good data out there. Joshua Eiler, professor, wrote a book on grading that just came out. I highly recommend it to all your listeners. It's fantastic. If you have anything to do with educating people at all, understanding where people are coming from, that they're not procrastinating because they're lazy. That's not what procrastination means. Procrastination is anxiety and EF struggles, for example. But it's a big lack of understanding, and then this idea that rigor, which is basically means being awful to your students, is more important than being humane, as though there were no middle ground. There's no middle ground between a fire hose and spoon feeding. Yes, there is, and that middle ground is where we should be.
Now, you had mentioned talking about helping all students and not a lot of changes that need to be made to support autistic students. So that makes me think about the concept of universal design. Where do you see, universal design needs, in my opinion, to be in all different types of environments. But where do you see where we're at with universal design and higher education as we move towards 2025?
Oh, no, it's not a thing. I think some professors would like to. At UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is a book called Universal Design for Learning. It's a great book. I recommend it. I am not even beginning to touch on UDL because UDL is even so much bigger than what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about, how about don't punish your students if they miss class and instead use attendance to find out whether they're okay or not. And if they miss class, say, are you okay? Because students, there's this adversarial relationship between professors and students, and no student who already has been berated for being weird their entire life is going to trust you as a professor if you are awful. Okay. It's just never going to happen. And so that means no neurodivergent student, no autistic student is going, I wouldn't, I never did. Okay. I was told my entire life that I was wrong. Everything I did was wrong because and now in retrospect, because I was autistic as heck. Right. And undiagnosed and had no support. But actually, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. I just was like asking questions, or maybe I should try it this way. And I don't but this is not how we're trained to see relationships between professors and students. It's very adversarial. We got to get that out of there. And then universal design, the other thing is that people take a look at it and they think this is way too overwhelming. I can't do all. And you know what? Maybe that's true right now. But you can change one thing. If your syllabus is 8 pages long, why? It's like these legal contracts that people just keep reusing after centuries. I'm like, I can write you a lease for an apartment that is 1 page in 12-point font, okay, with like 5 paragraphs total. It's a very legal, good, solid lease for an apartment. And I can write sales contracts for expensive items. I can do all sorts of things. They don't have to be long. They just are, because it's always been that way. And so when students get that fire hose of a syllabus, it's overwhelming. They miss the really important stuff because it's not there, because it's buried amongst the other things. Wheat and the chaff problem here. I'm like, well, why don't you just cut all the chaff from your syllabus? Start there. Rewrite your syllabus. Start from scratch. Type in Universal Design for Learning and the word syllabus into a search engine and see what comes up. It is amazing the kind of things you can do with your syllabus. And it makes your life easier as a professor, which is, by the way, extremely important, because mental health of faculty, and I use that term broadly, anybody who is responsible for the education of students is faculty. I'm not using that to mean only classroom teachers. Anyway, so if you're faculty and you are neurodivergent or otherwise struggle with your mental health, then you are also going to be struggling with EF stuff if this election has thrown you. then you are also, shorthanded and you're, running out of spoons, let's say. Okay. So these things will help you as well. And this is the most important thing. What if you just decided not to keep track of class participation at all? Like all this record keeping that we do. It's a waste of time. And different neurotypes participate differently. And that's something that, you get that through your head and then figure out, well, I'm just not going to worry about that. And instead, what I'm going to do is notice students who seem to be withdrawn and then have conversations with them if necessary. Say, just kind of check in with you. Are you all right? And you, by the way, in my experience, students, you have to ask them, 2 at least 3 times usually before they'll open up to you because this is not a relationship designed for trust. So are you all right? You seem quiet and you missed last class. Fine, we leave. And the next time, are you all right? I just genuinely want to know if you're okay and if there's anything I can do to help. And then at that point, no, I'm not all right. And then suddenly you're able to do something. And then you ideally have the resources at your institution that can help the student. You don't have to do that. You're not their therapist. That's not your job. Don't take on that weight. That's too much. But there are people who can, you partner with. They want you to.
I've been thinking more and more about AI these days and thought you might be a good person to discuss creative writing and AI as your creative writing coach. So, do you look at AI to be very harmful in the creative writing process, or might there be ways that AI could be helpful to people in this process?
So we're shifting gears to artificial intelligence, and I'm going to talk about, we'll say ChatGPT, because I think people are, generative AI tools, and the most common one being ChatGPT. We'll say that. And I just took a all-day workshop for lawyers in ChatGPT last Friday. So this is very timely on the topic because lawyers are writers. And I used to teach legal writing to law students. And then I did, a lot of writing when I was in practice. So the idea with ChatGPT, I used it yesterday, for example, because it will write pretty good captions for posts on Instagram. So if people would like to see a caption generated almost entirely by ChatGPT, including the hashtags, my latest post on Instagram that I put up today on failure, and it's a video of me screwing up royally at a horse show this weekend. It was very, very, very upsetting, actually. I went from first place to disqualified at this giant horse show, that was out of town and stuff. So that's really disappointing. It's really disappointing. And my spouse was filming us go. And so I have really excellent footage of me making this mistake. And I'm my face falls and I actually swear under my breath. I mean, it's the whole thing. But, it's fun to look at video and to pick music and then put something up on Instagram. I hate writing captions. So in the ChatGPT at the, an advice of a friend who does social media. And I said, please, in the prompt area, please write a caption and say, please write a caption for Instagram, that's very specific, about failure and mental health and me getting disqualified at a horse show. Please include hashtags. And it just barfed out something that I was able to cut and paste with minimal changes right into my Instagram. Now, as an author, full-time writer, social media is something I need to do. But it can be exhausting to come up with captions for social media, let's say, like that. And it doesn't mean that that's fake. That's, like I said, I edited it. But what ChatGPT did is it took something that felt like a really heavy burden, a hurdle to get over, right? So we're right back in the realm of executive function, something that I would have procrastinated on and never done, okay? And it took it away because I knew kind of what it needed to be. I was able to give the prompt, and the prompt was so good, in fact, that chat gave me exactly what I wanted. I just had to substitute some specifics for some generalities. So for people who struggle with getting started with things, like autistic people, sometimes it's I don't know where to begin. I'm overwhelmed. This is overwhelming. I spend half my life overwhelmed. I don't know about you, but that's just sort of my status quo. Normal is overwhelmed. So if you have to write something and you feel overwhelmed, I think that ChatGPT is fantastic. I was struggling with, I don't remember what it was. I had to describe what a live oak looks like. It's a type of tree we have here in the South, in the coastal areas mostly. And they're big, beautiful oak trees that can live for, it's our equivalent of the sequoia. Okay. They are centuries and centuries old and gigantic. Um, and I have climbed them and played in them and and pulled the Spanish moss out of them and worn it as a wig. I've been in live oak trees since I was a little kid because that's where I grew up. But I could not describe one. It was too much. It was like, oh my God, I have to describe a live oak. I don't know. It's a tree with branches that go out kind of sideways and the leaves are green. I mean, it's really hard, right? And so I went into ChatGPT and I said, please describe a live oak tree. And it did it. And I was like, thank you. But it wasn't anything I could cut and paste. But it got me over this place in this project I was writing that was like, I just felt so overwhelmed. I could not deal. It described the texture of the bark. And I was like, yes. So here's the thing. You can't trust ChatGPT to be accurate all the time. You have to know. You cannot rely on it. But it is an excellent tool if you struggle with, if you're a creative person, and I remember I use that very broadly. If you're a creative person and you have anxiety or EF struggles and you have trouble getting started sometimes on something or just getting something done, like a post to Instagram, and you just need a caption that does all the right dance moves, because that in the end is what the algorithm cares about. I'm giving Meta free content. I don't think so. All right. Now, if people get into my comments, I have lovely conversations with the people in my comments that are very personal. Okay. But that caption, that's just free food for Facebook, right? I don't need to spend my creativity spoons on generating that. Chat can do that for me. That's fine. I have no problem. I got to make sure it's right. And then I put it up. And so that first time I've ever really done that was this latest post. My Instagram is at KRG Pryal. My name is Katie Rose Guest Pryal. So KRG Pryal. And it's the post I put up. I guess it was late last night, but it came out today, which is Monday, November 11th, about me screwing up at a war show and I go off course. That was ChatGPT. And I would imagine that more of those captions will also be generated that way since it was so successful.
Earlier, you were talking about creativity, the importance of it for each person. And I would definitely co-sign with that because I don't know how I'd exist without my creativity. But do recognize, like anything, there are pros and cons. So recently you wrote that we need to be alone to be creative, but we must be vigilant against isolation, which can harm our mental health. It's a delicate balance. I love all of that. So in what ways in your life have you found it helpful to navigate this delicate balance?
In this conversation, I've gone broader with neurodiversity and more narrow and to autistic and ADHD. So this is like, we're gonna get really autistic here, okay? Let's talk about that. When I write these things, and I don't know if this was on Psychology Today or a blog post, it sounds like a blog post there. But I'm writing about myself, and so what I noticed was that I told you I joke. I have 5 friends. I always joke. I have five friends, and sometimes it feels like I have much fewer than that. But I felt like I had gotten deeply disconnected from the writer community where I live. I just used to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody who lives in the state of at least in the entire state of North Carolina, who's an author. Right now, there's only one person that I can call on the phone and say, "Oh, you want to can I drive to your house and just get through this book with you?" I used to have 2 people that I was like that with, and then even more than that was maybe not that tight, more acquaintance level, but I had some trust with it. But I think it started with COVID, and then being autistic and kind of not noticing, I hyper focus on the work I'm doing. I don't maybe need as much external feedback as a lot of people might do of different neurotypes, because autistic people often don't really care, right? We can just sort of do our own thing. And it's not we don't care what other people think, but it's I live in a house full of autistic people. And if you ask us, we're not agonizing over I wasn't invited to this party. That's not something I really care about. I don't even know the party was happening. It's not a thing, right? It's just really not a thing. But it's a different. Oh no, I'm really not hitting this right because of course I am a highly neurotic person, so that's not right. I don't like being not invited. I do want to be invited to the party. I guess what I'm saying is that the social structure slipped away and I didn't notice. Maybe other neurotypes would have noticed sooner. I think that this is a struggle that autistic people might have, where we're like, oh, wait a minute, my friends are gone. What happened? I didn't notice. They went away. They moved to Cleveland, and I didn't notice. Sorry, Doug lives in Cleveland. Well, anyway, so and I didn't, and then now suddenly I don't have any friends, and I'm like, well, now I have to make friends, and of course that is the worst, and so now I have to like, how am I going to make friends? Now I want to die. Okay, and so there's this aloneness, so this idea of being a creative worker. So there's a worker whose work is creative, which means I often isolated. And then also being autistic. And you put those two things together, so if you're a computer coder and you just write code all day and then you come up for air and you're like, oh, my friends got married, had kids and moved to Cleveland. What happened? 3 years went by. It's what happened. And I don't know. I didn't even notice. But it's okay. And then, of course, like many autistic people, I struggle to make friends. I somehow produced one of my offspring who does not have this problem. It's very strange because just one of them is a social butterfly, completely hilarious. And he everywhere he goes, everybody loves him. I'm like, okay. I mean, he's the best friends with the whole world. I don't get it. But I was not that way. I struggled socially my whole life. And it has never gone away. I still struggle socially. That's why I have 5 friends. But when I ended up with just one, then I had a problem because I was lonely. And then I became depressed. And that was that.
And lastly, Katie, how can our listeners learn more about you, your books, and coaching services beyond this interview?
My website is katiepryal.com. It's first name, last name.com. Easy way to get there. And simple website. All my books are there and all the things that I do. So I maintain it well. So, and then of course, Instagram is my favorite social platform, but also LinkedIn. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'll absolutely happily do that. I'm easy to find. My last name is despite its short length, is unusual. So if you type Katie Pryal in anywhere, it's just me basically. There's like maybe one other on the planet. I think might be 2 of us now, but mostly what's going to come is my writing and things like that.
Well, I initially connected with you on LinkedIn, and I will continue to follow you on there. And it was wonderful to get a chance to have a conversation with you, Katie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks so much to Katie for the conversation. To learn more about Katie, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding if you are using AIs like ChatGPT to make your life less overwhelming. If so, we'd love for you to share your experience. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to lead self-directed, purpose-driven lives through our customized life coaching and community groups. Our distinct approach prioritizes each client's unique goals and preferences, fostering a sense of agency and promoting self-advocacy. Coaches work collaboratively with clients to develop personalized strategies and tools that can help with executive functioning, relationship building, stress management, and much more. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. With our accessible remote services, individuals from any location can receive the assistance and mentoring they need. So please join us today to experience judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.